The book of Asher, we're continuing on, starting with chapter 45 to 49. Chapter 45 goes over an account of the families of Jacob's sons. 46 goes over Joseph interprets the dreams of his fellow prisoners. Chapter 47 goes over Isaac blesses his two sons and dies, and they divide his property. And chapter 48 goes over Pharaoh's dreams. Not receiving a satisfactory interpretation from the magicians, he orders the wise men to be slain. Chapter 49 goes over Pharaoh assembles all the great men of the kingdom and desired to appoint Joseph to be governor of Egypt. Chapter 45. And it was at the time in the year which is the year of Joseph's going down to Egypt, after his brothers had told him, that Reuben the son of Jacob went to Timnah and took unto him for a wife Eliyah, the daughter of Avi the Canaanite, and he came to her. And Eliyah, the wife of Reuben, conceived and bare him Hanok, Pula, Chetzron, and Carmi, 4 sons. And Simeon his brother took his sister Dinah for a wife. And she bare unto him Memuel, Yemen, Ohad, Jachin, and Zochar, 5 sons. And he afterward came to Bunah, the Canaanitish woman. The same is Bunah, who Simeon took captive from the city of Shechem. And Bunah was before Dinah, and attended upon her. And Simeon came to her, and she bare unto him Saul. And Judah went at that time to Adullam, and he came to a man of Adullam, and his name was Hedorah. And Judah saw the daughter of a man from Canaan, and her name was Eliyah, the daughter of Shua. And he took her and came to her, and Eliyah bare unto Judah Anan, and Shiloh, 3 sons. And Levi and Issachar went to the land of the east, and they took unto themselves for wives the daughters of Jobab, the son of Yoktan, and the sons of Eber. And Jobab, the son of Yoktan, had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Adana, and the name of the younger was Arada. And Levi took Adina, and Issachar took Arida, and they came to the land of Canaan, to their father's house. And Adina bare unto Levi Gershom, Kehath, and Merari, 3 sons. Merari, sorry. And Arida bare unto Issachar Tola, Puva, Joel, and Shomron, 4 sons. And Dan went to the land of Moab, and he took for a wife Abhaleth, the daughter of Chamadan the Moabite, and he brought her to the land of Canaan. And Apalilat was barren; she had no offspring, and mighty God Ahiah afterward remember Aphalephet, the wife of Dan, and she conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Chushem. And Gad and Naphtali went to Haran, and it took for thence the daughters of Amuran, the son of Uz, the son of Nahor, for wives. And these are the names of the daughters of Amuran. The name of the elder was Miramoth, and the name of the younger was Uzith. And Naphtali took Miramoth, and Gad took Uzith, and brought them to the land of Canaan, to their father's house. And Miramoth bare unto Naphtali Yachzeel, Guni, Jezer, and Shalem, 4 sons. And Uzith bare unto Gad Zephion, and Chagi, and Shuni, and Esbon, Eri, Arodi, and Arali, 7 sons. And Asher went forth and took Adon, the daughter of Aphalah, the son of Adad, the son of Ishmael, for a wife, and he brought her to the land of Canaan. And Adon, the wife of Asher, died in those days. She had no offspring, and it was after the death of Adon that Asher went to the other side of the river and took for a wife Hedorah, the daughter of Abimael, the son of Eber, the son of Shem. And the young woman was of a comely appearance, and a woman of sense, and she had been the wife of Malchiel, the son of Elam, the son of Shem. And Hedorah bare a daughter unto Malchiel, and he called her name Serac. And Malchiel died after this, and Hedorah went and remained in her father's house. And after the death of the wife of Asher, he went and took Hedorah for a wife, and brought her to the land of Canaan. And Serac, her daughter, he also brought with them, and she was 3 years old, and the damsel was brought up in Jacob's house. And the damsel was of a comely appearance, and she went in the sanctified ways of the children of Jacob. She lacked nothing, and the mighty God Ahai gave her wisdom and understanding. And Hedorah, the wife of Asher, conceived and bare unto him Yimnah, Yishvi, and Beriah, 4 sons. And Zebulun went to Midian, and took for a wife Mirishah, the daughter of Molad, the son of Abidah, and the son of Midian, and brought her to the land of Canaan. And Mirishah bare unto Zebulun Seri, Elon, and Yakleel, 3 sons. And Jacob sent to Aran, the son of Zobah, the son of Terah, and he took for his son Benjamin Machpelah, the daughter of Aram, and she came to the land of Canaan to the house of Jacob. And Benjamin was 10 years old when he took Machpelah, the daughter of Aram, for a wife. And Machpelah conceived and bare unto Benjamin Bela, Bector, Ashbel, and Gera, and Naaman, 5 sons. And Benjamin went afterward and took for a wife Arabath, the daughter of Shomron, the son of Abraham, in addition to his first wife, and he was 18 years old. And Arabath bare unto Benjamin Archi, Vash, Mupim, Chupim, and Ord, 5 sons. And in those days Judah went to the house of Shem, and took Tamar, the daughter of Elam, the son of Shem, for a wife, for his firstborn heir. And Er came to his wife Tamar, and she became his wife. And when he came to her, he outwardly destroyed his seed, and his work was evil in the sight of mighty God Ahai, and mighty God Ahai slew him. And it was after the death of Er, Judah's firstborn, that Judah said unto Onan, Go to thy brother's wife, and marry her as the next of kin, and raise up seed to thy brother. And Onan took Tamar for a wife, and he came to her. And Onan also did like unto the work of his brother, and his work was evil in the sight of mighty God Ahai, and he slew him also. And when Onan died, Judah said unto Tamar, Remain in thy father's house until my son Shiloh shall have grown up. And Judah did not more delight in Tamar to give her unto Shiloh, for he said, Peradventure he will also die like his brothers. And Tamar rose up and went and remained in her father's house. And Tamar was in her father's house for some time. And at the revolution of the year, Eliyah, the wife of Judah, died, and Judah was comforted to his wife. And after the death of Eliyah, Judah went up with his friend Hera to Tamnah to shear their sheep. And Tamar heard that Judah had gone up in Timnah to shear the sheep, and that Shiloh was grown up, and Judah did not delight in her. And Tamar rose up and put off the garments of her widowhood, and she put on a veil upon her, and she entirely covered herself, and she went and sat in the public thoroughfare, which is upon the road of Timnah. And Judah passed and saw her, and took her, and he came to her, and she conceived by him. And at the time of being delivered, behold, there was twins in her womb. And he called the name of the first one Perez, and the name of the second Zerah. Chapter 46. In those days Joseph was still confined in the prison house in the land of Egypt. At that time the attendants of Pharaoh was standing before him, the chief of the butlers, and the chief of the bakers, which belonged to the king of Egypt. And the butler took wine and placed it before the king to drink, and the baker placed bread before the king to eat. And the king drank of wine and ate of the bread, he and his servants and ministers that ate at the king's table. And whilst they were eating and drinking, the butler and the baker remained there. And the Pharaoh ministers found many flies in the wine which the butler had brought, and the stones of nitre were found in the baker's bread. And the captain of the guard placed Joseph as an attendant of Pharaoh's officers, and Pharaoh's officers were in confinement 1 year. And at the end of the year they both dreamed dreams in one night in the place of confinement where they were. And in the morning Joseph came to them to attend upon them as usual, and he saw them, and behold, their countenances were dejected and sad. And Joseph asked them, Why are your countenances sad and dejected this day? And they said unto him, We dreamed a dream, and there is no one to interpret it. And Joseph said unto them, Relate, I pray you, your dream unto me, and mighty God Ahijah shall give you an answer of peace as you desire. And the butler related his dream unto Joseph, and he said, I saw in my dream, and behold, a large vine was before me, and upon that vine I saw 3 branches, and the vine speedily blossomed and reached a great height, and its clusters were ripened and became grapes. And I took the grapes and pressed them in a cup and placed it in Pharaoh's hand, and he drank. And Joseph said unto him, The 3 branches that were upon thy vine are 3 days. Yet within 3 days the king will order thee to be brought out, and he will restore thee to thy office, and thou shalt give the king his wine to drink, as at first when thou wast his butler. But let me find favor in thy sight, that thou shalt remember me to Pharaoh, when it will be well with thee, and do kindness unto me, and get me brought forth from this prison. For I was stolen away from the land of Canaan, and was sold for a slave in this place. And also that which was told thee concerning my master's wife is false, for they placed me in this dungeon for naught. And the butler answered Joseph, saying, If the king deal well with me as at first, as thou last interpret to me, I will do all that thou desirest, and get thee brought out of this dungeon. And the baker, seeing that Joseph had accurately interpreted the butler's dream, also approached and related the whole of his dream to Joseph. And he said unto him, In my dream I saw, and behold, 3 white baskets upon my head. And I looked, and behold, there were in the uppermost basket all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, and behold, the birds were eating them from off my head. And Joseph said unto him, The 3 baskets which thou didst see are 3 days, yet within 3 days Pharaoh will take off thy head, and hang thee upon a tree, and the birds will eat thy flesh from off thee, as thou sawest in the dream. In those days the queen was about to be delivered, and upon that day she bare a son unto the king of Egypt. And they proclaimed that the king had gotten his firstborn son, and all the people of Egypt, together with the officers and servants of Pharaoh, rejoiced greatly. And upon the 3rd day of his birth Pharaoh made a feast for his officers and servants, for the host of the land of Zoar and of the land of Egypt. And all the people of Egypt and the servants of Pharaoh came to eat and drink with the king at the feast of his son, and to rejoice at the king's rejoicing. And all the officers of the king and his servants were rejoicing at that time for 8 days at the feast, and they made merry with all sorts of musical instruments, with timbrels and with dances, in the king's house for 8 days. And the butler to whom Joseph had interpreted his dream forgot Joseph, and he did not mention him to the king as he had promised. For this thing was from mighty God Ahijah, in order to punish Joseph, because he had trusted in man. And Joseph remained after this in the prison house 2 years, until he had completed 12 years. Chapter 47. And Isaac the son of Abraham was still living in those days in the land of Canaan. He was very aged, and 180 years old. And he saw his son, the brother of Jacob, was in the land of Edom, and he and his sons had possessions in it amongst the children of Seir. And Esau had heard that his father's time was drawing nigh to die, and he and his sons and his household came into the land of Canaan, unto his father's house. And Jacob and his sons went forth from the place where they dwelt in Hebron. And they all came to their father's Isaac, and they found Esau and his sons in the tent. And Jacob and his sons sat before his father Isaac, and Jacob was still mourning for his son Joseph. And Isaac said unto Jacob, Bring me hither thy sons, and I will bless them. And Jacob brought his 11 children before his father Isaac. And Isaac placed his hands upon all the sons of Jacob, and he took hold of them, and embraced them, and kissed them one by one. And Isaac blessed them on that day, and he said unto them, May mighty God Ahijah of your fathers bless you, and increase your seed like the stars of heaven for number. And Isaac also blessed the sons of Esau, saying, May God cause you to be a dread and a terror to all that will behold you, and to all your enemies. And Isaac called Jacob and his sons, and they all came and sat before Isaac. And Isaac said unto Jacob, Mighty God Ahijah, our Elohim of the whole earth, said unto me, Unto thy seed will I give this land for an inheritance, if thy children keep my statutes and my ways, and I will perform unto them the oath which I swore unto thy father Abraham. Now therefore, my son, teach thy children and thy children's children to fear mighty God Ahijah, and to go in the good way which will please mighty God Ahijah, our Elohim. For if you keep thy ways of mighty God Ahijah and his statutes, mighty God Ahijah will also keep unto you his covenant with Abraham, and will do well with you and your seed all the days. And when Isaac had finished commanding Jacob and his children, he gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people. And Jacob and Esau fell upon the face of their father Isaac, and they wept. And Isaac was 180 years old when he died in the land of Canaan, in Hebron. And his sons carried him to the cave of Machpelah, which Abraham had brought from the children of Heth for a possession of a burial place. And all the kings of the land of Canaan went with Jacob and Esau to bury Isaac, and all the kings of Canaan showed Isaac great honor at his death. And the sons of Jacob and the sons of Esau went barefooted round about, walking and lamenting, until they reached Kirith Arba. And Jacob and Esau buried their father Isaac in the cave of Machpelah, which is in Kirith Arba in Hebron, and they buried him with very great honor, as at the funeral of kings. And Jacob and his son, and Esau and his sons, and all the kings of Canaan made a great and heavy mourning, and they buried him and mourned for many days. And at the death of Isaac he left his cattle and his possessions and all his belongings to his sons. And Esau said unto Jacob, Behold, I pray thee, all that our father has left we will divide it in 2 parts, and I will have the choice. And Jacob said, We will do so. And Jacob took all that Isaac had left in the land of Canaan, the cattle and the property, and he placed them in 2 parts before Esau his sons. And he said unto Esau, Behold, all this is before thee. Choose thou unto thyself the half which thou wilt take. And Jacob said unto Esau, Hear thou, We'll back that up to verse 17. And Jacob said unto Esau, Hear thou, I pray thee, while I will speak unto thee, saying, Mighty God Ahijah, our Elohim of heaven and earth, spoken to our fathers Abraham and Isaac, saying, Unto thy seed will I give this land for an inheritance forever. Now therefore all that our father has left is before thee, and behold, all the land is before thee. Choose thou from them what thou desirest. If thou desirest the whole land, take it for thee and thy children forever, and I will take this riches. And if thou desire the riches, take it unto thee, and I will take the land for me and for my children to inherit it forever. And Nebaioth, the son of Ishmael, was then in the land with his children, and Esau went on that day and consulted with him, saying, Thus has Jacob spoken unto me, and thus has he answered me. Now give thy advice, and we will hear. And Nebaioth said, What is this that Jacob has spoken unto thee? Behold, all the children of Canaan are dwelling securely in the land, and Jacob said he will inherit it with his seed all the days. Go now therefore, and take all thy father's riches, and leave Jacob thy brother in the land, as he has spoken. And Esau rose up and returned to Jacob, and did all that Nebaioth the son of Ishmael had advised. And Esau took all the riches that Isaac had left, the souls, the beasts, the cattle, and the property, and all the riches. He gave nothing to his brother Jacob. And Jacob took all the land of Canaan from the brook of Egypt unto the river Euphrates, and he took it for an everlasting possession, and for his children and for his seed after him forever. And Jacob also took from his brother Esau the cave of Machpelah, which is in Hebron, which Abraham had bought from Ephron, for a possession of a burial place for him and his seed forever. And Jacob wrote all these things in the book of purchase, and he signed it, and he testified all this with faithful witnesses. And these are the words which Jacob wrote in the book, saying, The land of Canaan and all the cities of the Hittites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Girgashites, all the 7 nations from the river of Egypt unto the river Euphrates, and the city of Hebron, Kirith Arba, and the cave which is in it, the whole did Jacob buy for his brother Esau for value, for a possession, and for an inheritance for his seed after him forever. And Jacob took the book of purchase, and the signature, the command, and the statutes, and the revealed book, and he placed them in an earthen vessel, in order that they should remain for a long time, and he delivered them into the hand of his children. Esau took all that his father had left him after his death from his brother Jacob, and he took all the property from man and beast, camel and ass, ox and lamb, silver and gold, stones and bdellium, and all the riches which had belonged to Isaac the son of Abraham. There was nothing left which Esau did not take unto himself, for all that Isaac had left after his death. And Esau took all this, and he and his children went home to the land of Seir, to the Horite, away from his brother Jacob and his children. And Esau had possessions amongst the children of Seir, and Esau returned not to the land of Canaan from that day forward. And the whole land of Canaan became an inheritance to the children of Israel for an everlasting inheritance. And Esau with all his children inherit the mountain of Seir. Chapter 48. In those days after the death of Isaac, mighty God Ahijah commanded and caused a famine upon the whole earth. At that time Pharaoh king of Egypt was sitting upon his throne in the land of Egypt, and lay in his bed and dreamed dreams. And Pharaoh saw in his dream that he was standing by the side of the river of Egypt. And whilst he was standing, he saw, and behold, 7 fat-fleshed and well-favored kine came up out of the river, and 7 other kine, lean flesh, and it ill-favored, came upon after them, and the 7 ill-favored ones swallowed up the well-favored ones, and still their appearance was ill as at first. And he awoke, and he slept again, and he dreamed a second time, and he saw, and behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good, and 7 thin ears blasted with the east wind sprang up after them, and the thin ears swallowed up the full ones. And Pharaoh awoke out of his dreams. And in the morning the king remembered his dreams, and his spirit was sadly troubled on account of his dreams. And the king hastened and sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and the wise men, and they came and stood before Pharaoh. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed dreams, and there is none to interpret them. And they said unto the king, Relate thy dreams to thy servant, and let us hear them. And the king related his dreams to them, and they all answered and said with one voice to the king, May the king live forever, and this is the interpretation of thy dreams. The 7 good kine which thou didst see denote 7 daughters that will be born unto thee in the latter days, and the 7 kine which thou sawest come up after them and swallow them up, or for a sign that the daughters which will be born unto thee will all die in the lifetime of a king. And that which thou didst see in the second dream of 7 full good ears of corn coming up upon one stalk, this is their interpretation, that thou wilt build unto thyself in the latter days 7 cities throughout the land of Egypt. And that which thou sawest of the 7 blessed ears of corn springing up after them and swallowing them up whilst they did behold them with thine eyes, is for a sign that the cities which thou wilt build will all be destroyed in the latter days in the lifetime of the king. And when they spoke these words, the king did not incline his ears to their words, neither did he fix his heart upon them. For the king knew in his wisdom that they did not give a proper interpretation of the dreams. And when they had finished speaking before the king answered them, saying, What is this thing thou hast spoken unto me? Surely you have uttered falsehood and spoken lies. Therefore now give the proper interpretation of my dreams, that you may not die. And the king commanded after this, and he sent and called again for other wise men, and they came and stood before the king. And the king related his dreams to them, and they all answered him according to the first interpretation. And the king's anger was kindled, and he was very wroth. And the king said unto them, Surely you speak lies and other falsehoods in what you have said. And the king commanded that a proclamation should be issued throughout the land of Egypt, saying, It is resolved by the king and his great men, that any wise man who knoweth and understandeth the interpretation of dreams, and will not come this day before the king, shall die. And the man that will declare unto the king the proper interpretation of his dreams, there shall be given unto him all that he will require from the king. And all the wise men of the land of Egypt came before the king, together with all the magicians and sorcerers that were in Egypt, and in Goshen, in Ramesses, and in Tapachas, in Zor, and in all the places of the borders of Egypt, and they all stood before the king. And all the nobles and the princes and the attendants belonging to the king came together from all the cities of Egypt, and they all sat before the king. And the king related his dreams before the wise men and the princes, and all that sat before the king were astonished at the vision. And all the wise men who were before the king were greatly divided in their interpretations of the dreams. Some of them interpret them to the king, saying, The 7 good kine, or 7 kings, who from the king's issue will be raised over Egypt, and the 7 bad kine, or 7 princes, who will stand up against them in the latter days and destroy them, and the 7 ears of corn, or the 7 great princes belonging to Egypt, who will fall in the hands of the 7 less powerful princes of their enemies in the wars of our Lord the king. And some of them interpret to the king in the manner, saying, The 7 good kine, or for strong cities of Egypt, and the 7 bad kine, or the 7 nations of the land of Canaan, who will come against the 7 cities of Egypt in the latter days and destroy them. And that which thou sawest in the second dream of 7 good and bad ears of corn is a sign that the government of Egypt will again return to thy seed at first. And in his reign the people of the cities of Egypt will turn again the 7 cities of Canaan, who are stronger than they are, and will destroy them, and the government of Egypt will return to thy seed. And some of them said unto the king, This is the interpretation of thy dreams. The 7 good kine, or 7 queens, who thou wilt take for wives in the latter days, and the 7 bad kine denote that those women will all die in the lifetime of the king. And the 7 good and bad ears of corn which thou didst see in the second dream are 14 children, and it will be in the latter days that they will stand up and fight amongst themselves, and 7 of them will smite the 7 that are more powerful. And some of them said these words unto the king, saying, The 7 good kine denote the 7 children will be born to thee, and they will slay 7 of the children's children in the latter days. And the 7 good ears of corn which thou didst see in the second dream, or those princes against whom 7 other less powerful princes will fight and destroy them in the latter days, and avenge the children cause of the government will again return to thy seed. And the king heard all the words of these wise men of Egypt, and their interpretation of his dreams, and none of them pleased the king. And the king knew in his wisdom that they did not altogether speak correctly in all these words, for this was from mighty God high to frustrate the words of the wise men of Egypt, in order that Joseph might go forth from the house of confinement, and in order that he should become great in Egypt. And the king saw that none amongst all the wise men and magicians of Egypt spoke correctly to him, and the king's wrath was kindled, and his anger burned within him. And the king commanded that all the wise men and magicians should go out from before him, and they all went out from before the king with shame and disgrace. And the king commanded that a proclamation be sent throughout Egypt to slay all the magicians that were in Egypt, and not one of them should be suffered to live. And the captain of the guards belonging to the kings rose up, and each man drew his sword, and they began to smite the magicians of Egypt and the wise men. And after this, Merah, chief butler to the king, came and bowed down before the king and sat before him. And the butler said unto the king, May the king live forever, and his government be exalted in the land. Thou wast angry with thy servant in those days. Now 2 years past, and this placed me in the ward, and I was for some time in the ward, and I and the chief of the bakers. And there was with us a Hebrew servant belonging to the captain of the guard. His name was Joseph, for his master had been angry with him and placed him in the house of confinement, and he attended us there. And in some time after, when he was in the ward and dreamed dreams in one night, I and the chief of the baker, we dreamed, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And we came in the morning and told them to the servant, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream did he correctly interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so was the event. There fell not to the ground any of his words. And now therefore, my lord and king, do not slay the people of Egypt for naught. Behold, the slave is still confined in the house by the captain of the guard, his master in the house of confinement. If it pleases the king, let him send for him, that he may come before thee, and he will make known to thee the correct interpretation of the dream which thou didst dream. And the king heard the words of the chief butler, and the king ordered the wise men of Egypt should not be slain. And the king ordered his servants to bring Joseph before him, and the king said unto them, Go to him, and do not terrify him, lest he be confused, and we will know to speak properly. And the servants of the king went to Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And the king's servants shaved him, and he changed his prison garments, and he came before the king. And the king was sitting upon his royal throne in a princely dress, girt around with a golden ephod, and the fine gold which was upon it sparkled, and the carbuncle, and the ruby, and the emerald, together with all the precious stones that were upon the king's head, dazzled the eye. And Joseph wondered greatly at the king. And the throne upon which the king sat was covered with gold and silver, and with onyx stones, and it had 70 steps. And it was their custom throughout the land of Egypt that every man who came to speak to the king, if he was a prince or one that was estimable in the sight of the king, he ascended to the king's throne as far as the 31st step, and the king would descend to the 36th step and speak with him. If he was one of the common people, he ascended to the 3rd step, and the king would descend to the 4th and speak to him. And their custom was moreover that any man who understood to speak in all the 70 languages, he ascended the 70 steps and went up and spoke till he reached the king. And any man who could not complete the 70, he ascended as many steps as the languages which he knew to speak in. And it was customary in those days in Egypt that no one should reign over them, but who understood to speak in the 70 languages. And when Joseph came before the king, he bowed down to the ground before the king, and he ascended to the 3rd step. And the king sat upon the 4th step, and he spoke with Joseph. And the king said unto Joseph, I dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter to interpret it properly. And I commanded this day that all the magicians of Egypt and the wise men thereof should come before me. And I related my dreams to them, and no one has properly interpreted them to me. And after this I this day heard commanding concerning thee, that thou art a wise man, and canst correctly interpret every dream that thou hearest. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, Let Pharaoh relate his dream that he dreamed. Surely the interpretation belongeth to mighty God Ahijah. And Pharaoh related his dream to Joseph, the dream of the kine, and the dream of the ears of corn. And the king left off speaking. And Joseph was then clothed with the spirit of mighty God Ahiah before the king, and he knew all the things that would befall the king from that day forward. And he knew the proper interpretation of the king's dream, and he spoke before the king. And Joseph found favor in the sight of the king, and the king inclined his ears and his heart, and he heard all the words of Joseph. And Joseph said unto the king, Do not imagine that they are two dreams, for it is only one dream. For that which mighty God Ahiah has chosen to do throughout the land, he has shown to the king in his dream, and this is the proper interpretation of thy dreams. The 7 good kind of ears of corn, or 7 years, and the 7 bad kind of ears of corn are also 7 years, and it is one dream. Behold, the 7 years that are coming, there will be a great plenty throughout the land, and after that the 7 years of famine will follow them, a very grievous famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten from the land, and the famine will consume the inhabitants of the land. The king dreamed one dream, and the dream was therefore repented to Pharaoh, because the thing is established by mighty God Ahiah, and mighty God Ahiah will surely bring it to pass. Now therefore I will give thee counsel, and deliver thy soul and thy souls of the inhabitants of the land from the evil of the famine, that thou seek throughout the kingdom for a man very discreet and wise, who knoweth all the affairs of government, and appoint him to superintend over the land of Egypt. And let the man whom thou placest over Egypt appoint officers under him, that they gather in all the food of the good years that are coming, and let them lay up corn and deposit it in the appointed stores. And let them keep the food for 7 years of famine, that it may be found for thee and thy people and thy whole land, and that thy land be not cut off by the famine. Let all the inhabitants of the land be also ordered that they gather in every man the produce of his field, of all sorts of food during the 7 good years, and that they place it in their stores, that it may be found for them in the days of famine, and that they may live upon it. This is the proper interpretation of thy dream, and this is the counsel given to save thy soul and the souls of all thy subjects. And the king answered and said unto Joseph, Who said and who knoweth that thy words are correct? And he said unto the king, This shall be a sign for thee respecting all my words, that they are true, and that my advice is good for thee. Behold, thy wife sitteth this day upon the stool of delivery, and she will bear thee a son, and thou wilt rejoice with him. When thy child shall have gone forth from his mother's womb, thy firstborn son that has been born these 2 years back shall die, and thou wilt be comforted in the child that will be born unto thee this day. And Joseph finished speaking these words to the king, and he bowed down to the king, and he went out. And when Joseph had gone out from the king's presence, those signs which Joseph had spoken unto the king came to pass on that day. And the queen bare a son on that day, and the king heard the glad tidings about his son, and he rejoiced. And when the reporters had gone forth from the king's presence, the king's servants found the firstborn son of the king fallen dead upon the ground. And there was great lamentation and noise in the king's house. And the king heard it, and he said, What is the noise of lamentation that I have heard in the house? And they told the king that his firstborn son had died. Then the king knew all that Joseph's words that he had spoken were correct, and the king was consoled for his son by the child that was born to him on that day of Joseph had spoken. Chapter 49, the last chapter for today. After these things the king sent and assembled all the officers and servants and all the princes and nobles belonging to the king, and they all came before the king. And the king said unto them, Behold, you have seen and heard all the words of this Hebrew man, and all the signs which he declared would come to pass, and not any of his word have fallen to the ground. You know that he has given a proper interpretation of the dream, and it will surely come to pass. Now therefore take counsel, and know what you will do, and how the land will be delivered from the famine. Seek now and see whether the like can be found in whose heart there is wisdom and knowledge, and I will appoint him over the land. For you have heard what the Hebrew man has advised concerning this, to save the land therewith from the famine. And I know that the land will not be delivered from the famine, but with the advice of the Hebrew man, him that advised me. And they all answered the king and said, The counsel which the Hebrew has given concerning this is good. Now therefore, our Lord and King, behold, the whole land is in thy hand. Do that which seemeth good in thy sight. Him whom thou choosest, and whom thou in thy wisdom knowest to be wise and capable of delivering the land with his wisdom, him shall the king appoint to be under him over the land. And the king said to all the officers, I have thought that since God, mighty God Ahijah, has made known to the Hebrew man all that he has spoken, there is none so discreet and wise in the whole land as he is. If it seem good in your sight, I will place him over the land, for he will save the land with his wisdom. And all the officers answered the king and said, But surely it is written in the laws of Egypt, and it should not be violated, that no man shall reign over Egypt, nor be the second to the king, but one who has knowledge in all the languages of the sons of men. Now therefore, our Lord and King, behold, this Hebrew man can only speak the Hebrew language, and how then can he be over us the second under government, and a man who not even knoweth our language? Now we pray thee, send for him, and let him come before thee, and prove him in all things, and do as thou see fit. And the king said, It shall be done tomorrow, and the thing that you have spoken is good. And all the officers came on that day before the king. And on that night mighty God Ahijah sent one of his ministering angels, and he came into the land of Egypt unto Joseph. And the angel of mighty God Ahijah stood over Joseph, and behold, Joseph was lying in the bed at night in his master's house in the dungeon, for his master had put him back into the dungeon on account of his wife. And the angel roused him from his sleep, and Joseph rose up and stood upon his legs, and behold, the angel of mighty God Ahijah was standing opposite to him. And the angel of mighty God Ahijah spoke with Joseph, and he taught him all the languages of man in that night, and he called his name Jehoshaphat. And the angel of mighty God Ahijah went from him, and Joseph returned and lay upon his bed, and Joseph was astonished at the vision which he saw. And it came to pass in the morning that the king sent for all the officers and servants, and they all came and sat before the king. And the king ordered Joseph to be brought, and the king's servants went and brought Joseph before Pharaoh. And the king came forth and ascended the steps of the throne, and Joseph spoke unto the king in all languages. And Joseph went up to him and spoke unto the king until he arrived before the king in the 70th step, and he sat before the king. And the king greatly rejoiced on account of Joseph, and all the king's officers rejoiced greatly with the king when they heard all the words of Joseph. And the thing seemed good in the sight of the king and the officers to appoint Joseph to be second to the king over the whole land of Egypt. And the king spoke to Joseph, saying, Now thou didst give me counsel to appoint a wise man over the land of Egypt, in order with his wisdom to save the land from the famine. Now therefore, since mighty God Ahijah has made all this known to thee, and all the words which thou hast spoken, there is not throughout the land a discreet and wise man like unto thee. And thy name no more shall be called Joseph, but Zaphanappaneah shall be thy name, and thou shalt be second to me. And according to thy word shall be all the affairs of my government, and all thy words shall my people go out and come in. And from under thy hand shall my servant and officers receive their salary, which is given to them monthly, and to thee shall all the people of the land bow down. Only in my throne will I be greater than thou. And the king took off his ring from his hand and put it upon the hand of Joseph, and the king dressed Joseph in princely garments, and he put a golden crown upon his head, and he put a golden chain upon his neck. And the king commanded his servants, and they made him ride in the second chariot belonging to the king, that with that went opposite to the king's chariot, and he caused him to ride upon a great and strong horse from the king's horses, and to be conducted through the streets of the land of Egypt. And the king commanded that all those that played upon timbrels, harps, and other musical instruments should go forth with Joseph, and 1,000 timbrels, and 1,000 Machpelah, and 1,000 Nebalim went after him. And 5,000 men with drawn swords glittered in their hands, and they went marching and playing before Joseph. And 20,000 of the great men of the king, girt with girdles of skin covered with gold, marched at the right hand of Joseph, and the 20,000 at his left. And all the women and damsels went upon the roofs, or stood in the streets playing and rejoicing at Joseph, and gazed at the appearance of Joseph and at his beauty. And the king's people went before him and behind him, perfuming the road with frankincense and with cassias, and with all sorts of fine perfume, and scattered myrrh and aloes along the road. And 20 men proclaimed these words before him throughout the land in a loud voice. Do you see this man whom the king has chosen to be his second? All the affairs of government shall be regulated by him, and he that transgresseth his orders, or that does not bow down before him to the ground, shall die, for he rebels against the king and his second. And when the heralds had ceased proclaiming, all the people of Egypt bowed down to the ground before Joseph, and said, May the king live, also may his second live. And all the inhabitants of Egypt bowed down along the road, and when the heralds approached them, they bowed down, and they rejoiced with all sorts of timbrels and michals and nebals before Joseph. And Joseph upon his horse lifted up his eyes to heaven, and called out and said, He raiseth the poor man from the dust, he lifted up the needy from the dunghill. O mighty God, a higher of hosts, happy is the man who trusted in thee. Hallelujah. And Joseph passed throughout the land of Egypt with Pharaoh's servants and officers, and they showed him the whole land of Egypt and all the king's treasures. And Joseph returned and came on that day before Pharaoh, and the kings gave unto Joseph a possession in the land of Egypt, a possession of fields and vineyards. And the king gave unto Joseph 3,000 talents of silver, and 1,000 talents of gold, and onyx stones, and bdelliums, and gifts. And on the next day the king commanded all the people of Egypt to bring unto Joseph offering and gifts, and that he that violated the command of the king should die. And they made a high place in the street of the city, and they spread out garments there, and whoever brought anything to Joseph put it into the high place. And all the people of Egypt cast something into the high place, one man a golden earring, and another ring and earring, and different vessels of gold and silver work, and onyx stones, and bdellium did he cast upon the high place. Everyone gave something of what he possessed. And Joseph took all these and placed them in his treasuries. And all the officers and nobles belonging to the kings exalted Joseph, and they gave him many gifts, seeing that the king had chosen him to be his second. And the king sent to Potiphar, the son of Ariam, priest of On, and he took his young daughter Osnath, and gave her unto Joseph for a wife. And the damsel was very comely, a virgin whom man had not known, and Joseph took her for a wife. And the king said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and besides thee none shall dare to lift up his hand or his foot to regulate my people throughout the land of Egypt. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, and Joseph went out from before the king, and he became the king's second in Egypt. And the king gave Joseph 100 servants to attend him in his house, and Joseph also sent and purchased many servants, and they remained in the house of Joseph. Joseph then built for himself a very magnificent house, like unto the houses of kings, before the court of the king's palace. And he made in the house a large temple, very elegant in appearance and convenient for his residence. 3 years was Joseph in erecting his house. And Joseph made unto himself a very elegant throne of abundance of gold and silver, and he covered it with onyx stones and bdellium, and he made upon it the likeness of the whole land of Egypt, and the likeness of the river of Egypt that watered the whole land of Egypt. And Joseph sat securely upon his throne in his house, and mighty God Ahiah increased Joseph's wisdom. And all the inhabitants of Egypt and Pharaoh's servants and his princes loved Joseph exceedingly, for this thing was from mighty God Ahiah to Joseph. And Joseph had an army that made war, going out in hosts and troops to the number of 40,600 men, capable of bearing arms, to assist the king and Joseph against the enemy, besides the king's officers and his servants and inhabitants of Egypt without number. And Joseph gave unto his mighty men and to all his hosts shields and javelins and caps and coats of mail and stones for slinging. And that's the end of chapter 49. We're going to stop at that. Thank you for listening.